For as many weapons as there are in Destiny 2, it can be hard for newer players to know which ones are worth going after to prepare for raids and dungeons. I've been getting another important question from friends and clanmates who are newer to D2 and want to get into those endgame activities. Usually something like, Exotic, what good weapon should I get if I want to start doing endgame content? So in today's video, as a second part of my new player tips series, I'm going to go over the top weapons that new players can prioritize obtaining to be well equipped for endgame in no particular order. Having said that, this list will exclude all raid, dungeon, and adept weapons from GMs since I'm assuming newer players most likely haven't had a chance to do those yet. Some of these weapons may even help out the free-to-play Guardians as well, but I will, however, include exotics and legendaries that do come from paid content, just not from raids, dungeons, or GMs. Starting off in the Kinetic Slot, a very easy recommendation to make for newer players who have the Forsaken expansion and want to get into endgame content is the Izanagi's Burden. Izanagi's allows us to consume the magazine that loads a single high damage and high range shot. Izzy's is one of the best, if not the best weapon in the Kinetic Slot to use to help bump up your damage numbers during DPS and is a prime feature in DPS meta rotations at the moment. All you gotta do is hold your reload button to consume the magazine to proc Honed Edge, and you can be hitting bosses for massive headshot damage. Immediately after you fire, hold down your reload button again to restock the Honed Edge ×4 and then switch to your other weapons. Once newer players do get some good heavy weapons from raids and dungeons, then you can really start to take advantage of the auto-loading rocket and Izzy swapping meta we are currently in during Season 22 with an Apex Predator, for example. But that's for another video. Another fantastic kinetic exotic to pick up from the tower is the Wither Horde. Projectiles fired from this weapon blight the target on impact and apply a damage over time to the target. And when they die from Wither Horde, it then blights the ground for an AoE damage pool. If you haven't picked up Wither Horde from the tower kiosk yet, then you're missing out on terrific ad clear, area control, and one of the easiest damage over time weapons to use in the game. Literally just point and shoot, and it becomes even better when you have the catalyst completed as it applies auto-loading holster to the weapon. Moving right on down the list, next up is Lumina. This exotic hand cannon provides a 35% damage buff for a short time to yourself and allies that you shoot with noble rounds. Getting noble rounds with Lumina is as easy as getting a few kills and then shooting your teammates via hipfire. On top of the damage buff that Blessing of the Sky provides to you and your allies, it also heals your teammate that you shoot with a noble round. Lumina is a great option to have in your arsenal that you can use anytime really, but especially shines in DPS rotations for extra damage, especially when your team does not have a Well of Radiance. Just to be clear, no, the damage buff from a Well and Lumina won't stack. The 35% buff from Lumina will just override the 25% damage buff from Well. But Well is still useful obviously because it keeps you alive. Another great exotic hand cannon to keep on your radar is Malfeasance. With the Taken Predator and explosive shadow perks, Malfeasance is one of the better exotic primaries that is capable of insane damage output that provides a damage boost against taken enemies. Malfeasance is especially cracked when paired with Lucky Pants on Hunters, which can provide a 600% damage boost alone. And did I mention that the updated Catalyst gives it Vorpal Weapon? Yeah, that's a free 20% extra damage boost in PvE. It's nuts. On top of that, it also provides excellent utility with its intrinsic unstoppable stunning capabilities. Malfeasance is especially a beast in GMs in the right setting with a lot of taken enemies and can even be useful as a backup during DPS in case you need primary damage. In order to get Malfeasance, you need to kill the Ascendant Servitor boss in a Gambit match to get the Light in the Darkness exotic quest and then complete all the steps to get this weapon, which unfortunately requires playing a good amount of Gambit, but if you ask me, it's definitely worth it. Next up on the list is none other than Arbalest. This is the only linear fusion rifle in the Kinetic Slot and is a fantastic choice in endgame content to deal with barrier champions. With the Compounding Force exotic perk, Arbalest can one-shot any enemy shields, making it a force to be reckoned with in endgame content. On top of Compounding Force, Disruption Break makes enemies more vulnerable to kinetic damage after you break their shields. And what damage type is Arbalest? Kinetic. The little cherry on top is that the Catalyst gives Arbalest Genesis, which refills a magazine from reserves after breaking a combatant's shields. Not much more to say about the Arbalest, to be honest. You can acquire Arbalest via exotic Ingrams, very rare world drops, or from Xur whenever he happens to sell it. Heading over to one of my personal favorites from the Lightfall expansion is the Quicksilver Storm. This auto rifle can surprisingly pack a serious punch with the rocket tracers and grenades you can generate from the Grenade Chaser perk. By the way, if you didn't know, you can force the grenade reload animation on Quicksilver to go faster by tapping your reload button once after each grenade you shoot. Quicksilver obviously has some awesome synergy with the Strand subclass, allowing you to create tangles on Grenade Chaser final blows. And it has even more value anytime auto rifles have a seasonal artifact perk like it does now in Season 22. If you haven't picked this up from the Monument to Lost Light or from Banshee from playing Lightfall, I highly recommend keeping this weapon on your radar, as it's great for general use or even GMs for a primary ammo option. Diving into our first legendary on the list is the Riptide. Riptide is my favorite fusion rifle for the Kinetic Slot, as it is a rapid fire frame and has a great perk pool. You can get auto-loading holster, chill clip, lead from gold, vorpal weapon, demolitionist, and even frenzy. My favorite combo is auto-loading and chill clip. Even though chill clip got nerfed, it's still not horrible and can provide some good utility to slow enemies. That makes it fine against overload champions, for example, but these days you might be better off with frenzy or vorpal weapon for DPS instead of chill clip. Riptide is a great general use option for newer players and free-to-play players, as you can get it from playing Crucible and through focus decoding it at Lord Shaxx in the tower. Continuing with kinetic legendaries, we have some of my favorite shotguns in the game with the Wastelander M5 and the Ragnhild D. Both are fantastic shotguns to have in the kinetic slot, as they are both craftable and fairly easy to acquire. Wastelander is from Dares of Eternity and can get lead from gold, 1-2 punch, or vorpal weapon. And the Ragnhild pattern is obtained from completing the Reshaping the Enigma Foundry quest from the Witch Queen expansion. It can roll perks like auto-loading holster and also 1-2 punch. Both are great shotguns to have for melee focused builds and damage output in in-game activities. And if you need a good pellet shotgun to run during DPS, the Wastelander is a great choice with vorpal weapon for an extra 15% damage boost on special weapons. Another craftable weapon from Dares of Eternity that can come in handy is the Pardon Our Dust grenade launcher. Pardon Our Dust is arguably the most accessible kinetic grenade launcher that can get disorienting grenades, which is really useful in difficult endgame content to blind enemies and stay alive. Other options like the Lingering Dread, the Militia's Birthright Adept, and the Ignition Code are from a dungeon, GM, and an overpopulated Dares of Eternity loot rotation and are not as readily available. That said, if you're a newer player and you want a blinding GL, I would highly recommend getting the pattern for Pardon Our Dust from Dares of Eternity. Wrapping up the kinetic slot, we have one of my new favorite SMGs, the Showrunner. This SMG is a recovered Red War weapon with a brand new perk pool from the ritual table in the Helm, and can be focused with 2 Witches Ingrams and some Glimmer. I would be on the lookout for an Overflow and Kinetic Tremors roll with Ricochet rounds. Overflow doubles your magazine size anytime you pick up special or heavy ammo, and pairing that with Kinetic Tremors, every 14 bullets you land you will emit shockwaves that deal kinetic damage in an area, making it great for chunking down tougher combatants. The Showrunner is a great option if you're looking for a kinetic SMG, and keep in mind, with the Nerf to Double special, it's a great option to have around as a primary checklist item for general use. Moving over to the energy slot, I've got the Sunshot, Trinity Ghoul, and Graviton Lance. I've grouped these weapons together because they basically do the same thing, they're just different elements and different weapon types. All 3 can provide some of the best ad clear in the entire game and are amazing for general use. With Sunshot and Graviton, you literally just have to kill a single ad and let their exotic perks do the rest. Trinity Ghoul is slightly different, as you need to get a kill first, and then once Lightning Rod is procced, you can just keep spamming bow shots near enemies for some insane jolt chaining. All 3 can be acquired via exotic Ingrams, rare world drops, and from Xur whenever he is selling them, so definitely be on the lookout for them there if you don't have them already. Going over to the next weapon on the energy slot, I've got the Iterative Loop. Iterative Loop has been one of my favorite weapons recently. I'm a big fan of rapid fire fusions, and I think Iterative Loop is one of the best. It has a great perk pool for PvE and PvP, but for my PvE role, I use Lead from Gold and Volt Shot. This weapon is featured in almost all of my DPS loadouts, as rapid fire fusions are great to use with bait and switch rockets. For For newer players, I would expect most not to have a bait and switch rocket quite yet, but it is another great weapon for general use and damage output as well. If you have the Lightfall expansion and don't have the pattern for the loop yet, I would highly recommend doing the weekly Lightfall campaign mission each week to catch up on your Red Border progress. If you don't have Lightfall and still would like a pretty good rapid fire fusion rifle, I would recommend the Null Composure from the Monument to Lost Light in the tower. Heading over to our first Waveframe GL on the list, next up we have the Harsh Language. Waveframe grenade launchers are some of the best, if not the best, archetypes in the entire game, as they can make ad clear an absolute breeze. Harsh Language is probably the most accessible Waveframe out of most that are worth getting, outside of raids and dungeons of course, and can roll perks like Envious Assassin, Destabilizing Rounds, and Repulsor Brace. You can pick up one of these bad boys from opening Legendary Ingrams or at Banshee, who will occasionally sell them. My next recommendation for newer players who want an all-around solid weapon is the Amit AR2. It's really easy to get, and it's also craftable with perks like Triple Tap, Dynamic Sway Reduction, and Incandescent, making it a solid choice for ad clear in PvE and general use in both PvE and PvP. You only need 2 red border drops for this weapon to unlock the pattern too, so there's a good chance you have the pattern already if you've played for even a little bit. You can obtain this weapon and its pattern from opening Legendary Ingrams or from rank up packages from Banshee. Diving into another great shotgun to keep on your radar is the Xenoclast 4. Xenoclast is a great option to keep in mind for newer players that need a shotgun for the energy slot, as it can roll auto-loading holster, lead from gold, 1-2 punch, and Vorpal weapon. The vast perk pool on this gun makes it extremely versatile for general use and DPS phases, especially melee focused builds with that 1-2 punch. You can pick up a Xenoclast from the Vanguard Strike playlist, opening rank up packages from Zavala, or even focus decoding it from him. Finally, for my last recommendations in the energy slot, I would recommend these SMGs. The Funnel Web, Ikilos SMG, and the Callus Mini Tool or the Bug Out Bag. SMGs have been really strong for a little while now despite some recent nerfs, and are a staple to most players' loadouts for general use, including myself. These 4 SMGs previously stated are, in my opinion, the best in-slot options for each elemental type. For the Funnel Web, be on the lookout for a Subsistence Frenzy roll from Banshee or from opening Legendary Ingrams. The Ikilos and Callus Mini Tool are both craftable. You just have to do the exotic missions each week when available in order to keep up with your pattern progress. For the Ikilos, it's Operation Seraph Shield and Presage for the Callus Mini Tool. The Bug Out Bag is slightly different, as it is now an old Season 21 weapon, so in order to focus decode them, you need to pick up the artifact from Season of the Deep in the helm so you can earn deep Ingrams if you don't already have it. Once you get some, go ahead and spend away, and be on the lookout for a Subsistence Incandescent roll with Ricochet rounds. Last and certainly not least, probably the most important slot to cover honestly, is the Heavy Slot. And this should come as a no-brainer to most, but for DPS in raids and dungeons, you're going to need a decent rocket launcher to start. Having said this, I would highly recommend the Hothead rocket launcher for newer players who want to be well equipped for endgame content. The Hothead has a great perk pool and can roll perks like auto-loading holster, demolitionist, field prep, explosive light, clown cartridge, and Vorpal weapon. Personally, I prefer an impact casing field prep clown cartridge roll for faster reloads and quicker damage output, but you could also use a roll like demo and explosive light or auto loading or Vorpal too. You can obtain the Hothead from focus decoding it at Commander Zavala in the tower. If you're not into Vanguard strikes, you can even opt for the blowout from Lord Shax. It also has a fairly good perk pool and can roll perks like demolitionist, tracking module, field prep, explosive light, and Vorpal weapon. Of course, not every boss or situation is best suited with the rocket launcher, which is why it's also important to have a good linear fusion rifle. For that, I recommend the Taipan 4FR. The Taipan is another easy weapon to acquire from Banshee or Legendary Ingrams that you can craft and put the god roll on yourself. Plus, you only need 2 red boards to complete the pattern for it, so it shouldn't take long to get if you don't already have it. For the Taipan, I recommend Triple Tap and Firing Line for 20% increased damage while standing near 2 allies. Moving on to one of the first exotic new players can get is the Tractor Cannon. Tractor Cannon is the most reliable source for a 30% debuff for boss damage in the entire game, and is usually a staple in most melee-focused builds and DPS scenarios that allow for it. All you gotta do is talk to Shah Han in the Cosmodrome and grab Maeve's key from him. This will give you the key to the chest that is right behind you here in this cave. Once you open it up, you've got Tractor Cannon. Heading over to another solid exotic to have within your arsenal is the Sleeper Simulant Linear Fusion Rifle. Sleeper is a fine choice when it comes to DPS encounters that require a linear, as rounds overpenetrate the target and dish out solid damage. Only downside to Sleeper is that you really should have the catalyst completed to really make use of the weapon, as it provides accelerated coils for faster charge time and deep pockets for larger ammo reserves. You can get your hands on the Sleeper Simulant from the Monument to Lost Light in the tower if you have the required materials. Swinging to the next weapon on the list is the Lament. Lament is one of the premier sword options for DPS encounters where they are viable, especially Crota. For those who don't know, to fully optimize damage with the Lament, your setup should be the following. Triple Solar Surge mods, a couple copies of Lucent Blades on your chest, and all you gotta do is block for a brief second, do 2 light attacks, 1 heavy, and 2 more light attacks, then repeat. Capping your frame rate around 60 FPS if you're on PC also helps with the tracking of your swings for some reason. Lament is a beast of a sword, as Banshee's wails charge up the chainsaw on the sword, making every swing after blocking a heavy attack technically for some big boy damage. Lament also has intrinsic anti-barrier, plus provides healing when striking an enemy with charged attacks. You can get the Lament by completing the Lost Lament exotic quest from the Beyond Light expansion. It is a little lengthy, but it's totally worth it. Another, well, rather interesting exotic weapon to have on deck is the Parasite. Parasite shines in situations where you need huge burst damage in a very short window. Prime example of this is Atrax in the Deepstone Crypt raid. All you gotta do is get your Worm's Hunger stacks maxed out at 20 by killing other enemies and then firing the weapon. This grenade launcher is acquired via the Of Queen and Worms exotic quest after beating the Witch Queen campaign. It's a little bit of a longer quest, but it is actually a really fun one in my opinion, and it's really funny too. I had a blast doing it. This list also wouldn't be complete without everyone's favorite swords in all of Destiny 2, and they are the Half-Truths and the Other Half. These are the only 2 swords in the game that can roll Eager Edge, and if you don't already know, they are the pinnacle of swords when it comes to movement tech like sword skating, shatter skating, and well skating. So if you want to get your hands on one of these swords to become a movement god in raids, which is kind of like half the fun if you ask me, check out my guides on how to farm them. I also have a few guides on how to well skate and shatter skate on my channel, so feel free to use those if you need to learn these techs. Links are in the description. And lastly, over to our first machine gun on the list is the coveted Retrofit Escapade. Retrofit is a very good machine gun to have for general use, ad clear, and damage against tougher enemies when you really need to slay out. I would argue it's probably one of the most accessible recently, since Banshee has been selling it quite often during Season 22. It's also craftable, and you can get your pattern progress from completing Operation Seraph Shield each week when it's in rotation for a chance to get your red borders. I would definitely be on the lookout for a 4th times a charm and target lock roll from Banshee, Xur, or if you just want to go ahead and craft it yourself. That is going to do it for today's video. If you enjoyed it and if it helped you out, please leave a like and comment, and consider subscribing to the channel if you're part of the 98% not already subbed for more Destiny 2 tips, tricks, and guides, as it is absolutely free. As a reminder, if you want to stay up to date on my content and live streams, feel free to join my Discord server. Also, if you want to join a community of Guardians to hang out with, make friends, find people to play D2 with, and get PvE help from me, feel free to join the Notorious Destiny community. We're a growing community of Guardians. Welcome to those of all skill levels. Links are in the description. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.